Hi, welcome to Live Boldly Ministries podcast. And, Live Boldly Ministries really is a ministry that is telling people to kind of go out of their comfort zone and like be purposeful and intentional in the things that you do and ways you can help people overcome things and do things. And I've had Dave and Deb Beddoe in my head since we started this podcast over a year ago, but we've all been busy and it's just been hard to get a hold of them. But I have their book and I am so thankful to finally have them on the podcast. And uh, he is the pastor of Restore Church in Paulsbo, Washington, which Paulsbo is beautiful. I've been to a wedding there, maybe in that church. I don't know. And he has led recovery ministries and groups for 14 years. And Deb is an author and freelance writer and editor and writing coach. And the book is really well written. I have to say, I really enjoyed it a lot. And to start with, then, why don't we talk about, give us the title of the book and why you decided to write it, and what made you want to share your experience with others?
Well, I guess I can jump into the writing of it and why writing, and then let Dave talk about it. One of the reasons that I wanted to write a book about it is because so much of the work that is out there about addiction recovery um, is not personal. It's not a personal story. A lot of it comes from people who have worked in recovery or work with
Nicole,
addicts.
yeah.
Yeah, but not a real life story. Also, because we were in ministry at the time, and that's definitely not something that people talk about. People who are in ministry, they don't talk about their personal lives a lot, and especially you don't want to talk about your struggles because it can mean losing your job,
Right.
which is I mean, in our case, I mean, in some cases it's a good thing. Maybe the ministry wasn't the right place or time, but it's very difficult to seek out help when you're in ministry. And then also it's difficult to find help even just being a Christian, because addiction especially is one of those topics that we tend to think once you're saved, this is a problem that goes away. Like, you won't have this issue anymore once you give your life to Jesus and the Holy Spirit takes over. And so those were some things, some roadblocks that I ran into as a wife in seeking help for myself, even when Dave was not seeking help for himself. Um, I wanted to give someone an inside story with Dave's blessing and permission and of his using his story, an inside story, and then also have useful, helpful things to point someone who is following Jesus, but is struggling. And whether they're
Yeah.
the addict themselves or whether they are loving someone who is in
Right.
addiction.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I think it was, I mean, I was the subject. So um, I think it's important, the 12th step is to pass along what we have learned, what we have gained. And that was a platform, having Deb be a writer and a researcher and willing to kind of put down our story and then weave into that this idea of not just telling another addict story. That's important, that we tell the story of how we got where we were and how we began to climb out and what that experience is like, to not normalize it. Well, maybe normalize it. The idea that people have all sorts of addictions and we need to talk
Yes.
about it. But also for those who love addicts or want to help them, how to actually do that. And so sharing our story, that was a big part of it for me, not just unburdening myself, but maybe encouraging somebody else that you can come back different. You can come back changed and healthier and have new tools to deal with life. And then to give encouragement to those around that the community that you're in can be the difference. That is the difference between making it and not making it. I mean,
Mhm.
statistically, even a bad community, even a community that's not
Mhm.
educated, and by that I mean someone that's not experts or even may
Mhm.
not even have faith, but just a community is the number one predictor of long-term success when dealing with a
Mhm.
long-term recovery.
Mhm.
And so giving hope and maybe a few tools, um, and I'm sure we'll talk about this too, but as we got into it, the other piece was that's way more important than whatever program you're going to pick, whatever plan, whatever book, whatever system. Those all can be great, but it's usually a mix of all that stuff. But you've got to have a community and hopefully, not to give away the plot, but one that is compassionate to the to each other, to the addict in particular, but then to each other.
One thing that I really liked about this book was I liked you going back and forth in the different chapter, like on different parts, each of you giving your viewpoint of it. And it was neat to see you working through it and what it was like for each of you. Um, our family has some people who have suffered with addiction issues, and I know from them that, they haven't always had that transparency because they don't always feel accepted.
Mhm.
And so they've had a hard time with that. And even one of them attending a church for quite a while, no one talking to them,
Mm.
was really, not encouraging. I think just feeling like, it's a different kind of addiction than you have, but them feeling that no one would accept them, or maybe it's also even in their demeanor and how they approach people, because they felt that heavy weight of, feeling that way when they went in somewhere to talk to someone. And so I think, you know, I don't know. I had a copy of the book, but I can't, I thought it was in my
Mhm.
briefcase, but I guess it's not. No, I had it yesterday. So anyway, it's okay, Jessica. But anyway, why don't you give me the name? Celebrate Recovery, right? No,
Uh,
I'm sorry. That's the church. Yeah. Yes, there you go. Thank you.
Is it
The Heart of
backwards?
Recovery. The Heart of Recovery. No, it's correct for me at least,
Okay.
anyway. But yeah, Heart of Recovery. And I just really loved how it was written, and it's easy to read. It's an easy read, and you want to just keep reading. And one thing that I wanted to ask you was, in the book, and I think people, they know that there's drugs out there. There's been drugs out there for 100 years. But as far as the stats for the painkiller crisis in America,
Mhm.
it's like the number one cause of death in some places. So do you know some info on that you could give us? Because I think the listeners would really be interested in that.
Yeah, and I don't think these stats have changed since the book came out 5 years ago. But the statistic is that over 11 million Americans have abused prescription painkillers in the past year. And then 1.7 million of Americans in general, struggle with addiction to prescription painkillers alone, not including other addictions, just
Yeah,
prescription
yeah.
painkillers.
And one of the things that was just so shocking in reading is that how doctors were just so free to just give you samples,
Mhm,
and just it's just out there, and it was so
mhm,
easy. It was just so accessible, and um, that's frustrating because they're supposed to have your back. I mean, it's like that was frustrating.
mhm,
yeah, I think when I first started I mean, my story is I used to get migraines, and I think it was towards the end of college with the first. I didn't even know you could go to the doctor for a headache. Um, but when I went to a doctor, and they would just give me, back then, there weren't even migraine specific medications. It was,
Yeah.
here's a handful of Vicodin and hope, go lay down, which to be honest worked. I mean, sort of. But man, I do believe there's a genetic component to addiction because, man, or maybe just a body chemistry. Maybe it's not genetic, but whatever. We're different people. For me, man, the first time I took an opioid, it was fireworks going off. And over the years, yes, there needed to be stronger safeguards. But also, once you're an addict, you really learn how to game the system. So there's definitely, I don't know if I want to say fault, but there's definitely problems on both sides. It was
Mhm.
easier for me, especially I also started taking the drug I ended up the last half of my journey was a one called tramadol, which was supposed to be this miracle non-addictive, non-opioid painkiller, which you know 5 years later they went, oh oops, so we guess it's.
Yeah, exactly.
They
Ah,
would give me hundreds for free because they'd go, oh well, I had doctors all the time tell me you don't have an addictive personality, which how do they know? I mean, to be
yeah,
honest,
right,
which I didn't
right.
have. I have an amazingly addictive personality. If I like a Three Musketeer for some reason out of the blue, I'm gonna eat nine. If I have a TV show that I like, I'm gonna watch it every day till I've watched the whole series 3 times. If I'm,
Oh, I do that too. Yeah.
yeah. So, but because I was a nice man, a nice young man who was in a Bible college or going to seminary, um, didn't look like what they think an addict looks like. There were very few questions. Now, eventually, it caught up with me, of course, and I had to be a little
Mm.
sneakier, and they'd have doctors or pharmacists begin to question it. And you're talking about the statistics. I'm going to throw one thing out, and that has changed in the last 5 years since the book came out, and sadly, it hasn't done what we'd hoped. The
Mm.
different states and municipalities that have sued some of these companies that marketed that this whole idea that pain is another thing we need to control and eliminate, and marketed these as safe. They've had to give millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, um, and that money so often has been used for things that are not what it's intended to be used for. A
Wow.
lot of it has gone to
Yeah.
policing instead of
Yeah.
a lot of it has gone to just municipal slush funds. And so sadly, we should see those numbers going down, but they're not because so much of the resources are used for after the fact because they don't really want to understand the problem. And back to your original thing, the stigma of addiction for those who are not addicts is it's a moral failing that if you just could have a stiff upper lip and make better
Mm.
choices, you'd be fine. And whether that's the church or whether that's the state or whether that's people in community, that's something we got to continue to fight against.
Yeah. It's very frustrating and heartbreaking. I mean, from my loved ones dealing with stuff, with, some people being compassionate about it and some people like totally like, yeah, like, what have you done wrong to why this has happened? And it's just frustrating. And then, you know, then their loved ones, their family feels like nobody wants to do with them. And it's just like a ripple effect, which Deb, you probably encountered things as a family. It's like then, everyone in the family is affected by this like cloud that's over them. And it's unfair. It's not good. Not a good uh, um and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. The book really talks about the opioid crisis, which is, I don't know, somehow it's somewhat a little more acceptable because it's not your fault, or well, it is, but it's not like someone's kid doing heroin or something. It's because it's like, well, that's the doctor's fault, not the parent's fault, or whatever. So do you think that this book is helpful also to families suffering with other kinds of addiction, even alcoholism? I mean, alcohol is just so free, and I feel like it's had a real big surge, whereas, wine and beer would be more acceptable with stuff. And now there's all this group of 20s and 30s, and they're making mixed drinks. And it's just part of the fun. And it's just part of it's way more acceptable. And it was like that in the 40s, maybe, but the 40s, but, but I don't know. There's so many different kinds of addictions. And I feel like they have different measures of how people view them.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, but this book would affect, could be helpful for anybody, I feel like,
Mhm.
even people not in the opioid world.
Yeah, there are some similarities. I've been doing recovery work for years, and actually very few have been, I shouldn't say that. Usually there's many addictions. And
Right.
so not many of them have been just opioid or pill that I've worked with, but there's some commonality to the solutions that certainly the book could help. And definitely for the people around, regardless of the addiction, whether it's alcohol or, some other chemical, food, um,
Mhm.
pornography, whatever it is that somebody feels that they are incapable of solving on their own. And like we say, you talk about whose fault. Um, just like everybody's solution is a little mixed bag that it's going to have components of group, have some components of therapy, have some components of medical help, some social help, some spiritual help, some accountability. All of those things are also part of what gets you into it. So you have to address all of those too. So there's some familial, there's some physical, there's some societal, there's some culture, all those things help bring the problem to you as well. So some of them, it varies in the consequence of the addiction.
Yeah. Right.
It varies in the impact on others.
Mhm.
It varies maybe in the acceptability. So all of those are things that change maybe how we feel about it. But a lot of the same pieces um, are going to be a part of ongoing, continual recovery, relapse, recovery, success for you and the people around you.
Mhm. Right. Um, okay. If you're just tuning in, we're talking to Dave and Deborah Beddoe. They are the authors of um, Recovery. What's the title again? Keep forgetting.
The Heart of Recovery.
Heart of Recovery. Sorry. Heart of Recovery, and just really good information about. We probably all know someone affected in some way by addiction. Um, you talk a lot in the book about the sense of community and transparency and how those things are such an important thing. So some things are just hidden and people try to cope by themselves. And you guys went through that. And you were able, Dave, to hide things from Deb for a really long time. And but it kind of catches up with people. And once you're transparent and it's kind of out there, you you have more of an ability to heal. And then you get that sense of community. Why don't you guys talk about that a little bit? How you've touched on a little bit already, but how that's just the key.
Mhm. Mhm. Do you? I guess I'll
Either
start.
one of you, yeah.
Yeah, I think uh, this is sort of a saying in recovery groups that you're only as sick as your secrets, and that there is so much truth in that if you let people into what's going on, because it's just our human nature to hide what we're struggling with. And especially when we know that there are going to be consequences if we share this with anyone. And so I think one of the first things was finding a safe place to share is number one. And it took me a long time to find a safe place to share, in part
Mm.
because I didn't know about Celebrate Recovery at the time, and it was pretty new when we were when at the beginning of our search for help. Um, and I didn't think that as a Christian that I should go and find help in just a regular AA or NA. And I don't know why I had that view, but I did. It was just kind of like, oh, we don't want to
Uh-huh.
take this. I mean, I do know why I had that view. We don't want to take our problems to the world. You know, I'm a Christian, I
Mhm.
should be better.
Mhm.
And that's not necessarily true. And I actually, we would have had so much help had I been humble enough to go and seek that help, because that's where it was. You'd go to a pastor, and pastor didn't have resources for it, especially for the opioid addiction at the time. Now I think there are a lot of pastors who are much better resourced to point to things, just because we do have programs like Celebrate Recovery to point people to of a Christ-based recovery program, so that mixes both. It is
Mhm.
God, and but Dave will say this, you know, every AA group also acknowledges the higher power, and so
Mhm.
it isn't just me, it's also, you know,
Mhm.
God.
Mhm. Right.
But yeah, so I think that's the first thing, was finding a safe place to share. Helps free you of that secret that is, in many ways, it's killing you. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think um, sadly, the church, and I think it is more resourced and people are more understanding. And the more I'm pastoring and the more I'm in the church, I'm realizing it's not just with addiction, but with all sorts of problems that we so often in the church, we want to fix a problem where we feel like it should have already been fixed. So um, shame and fear go hand in hand, and transparency can only happen when you know you're not going to be killed for what you say or what you're transparent about, right? And so,
Exactly.
um, and we had some loving, kind people who had our best interest at heart. That when I leaked a little bit out, shared a little bit of what was going, not even
Mhm.
for the massive years. And when I first kind of stuck my toe in, we're like,
Uh-huh.
you should never ever tell, you can never tell the church this. So get fixed, go to rehab, come back. But if you want to be involved in the ministry, you can never share this. And so of course I relapsed. And not because their fault. They at that point, I think that generation definitely did not know how to manage that.
Mhm. Right.
And so when I came back, when I relapsed and got clean for for real, um, when it took, part of that was it was very public. I was the director of a Christian camp and got caught there and got fired from that job and had to move out of the house, all that stuff. But also we had it. I'm going to get choked up. My the church I was going to, the pastor of that church, um, I called him and said, hey, I've been, we had been meeting, and I said, I've been lying to you for the last couple of years. I've been using again. And he was like, oh, I'm so frustrated. And he said, so we'll see you Sunday. And I go, he's like, yeah. He goes, oh, we're all messed up. Our whole church is full of messed up people.
Right.
And Jim, Pastor Jim, became a few years later when the associate had moved on. He in the church, I had always said, I'm never going to go back into ministry unless I can work with addiction and unless that whole community knows my story. So it's not a secret. And that church agreed to hire me as the associate because they were like, we think this addiction thing might become a problem.
In
Yeah,
the world at large.
the world at large. And we want you here not in spite of your story, but because of it. And um, Jim and I then were pastors together for 10 years, and now he's moved on. And um, so this is why I get to be here. But a lot of that is because then we had this community who, even though they didn't really know how to deal with it, they didn't have expertise, they
Mhm.
didn't have experience, they loved me and my wife and my kids, and they have a soft spot for people on the margins. And that made it a safe, that does Deb's talking about the safe place. So there's not just a safe place, but safe people to share who, now I'm going to get on my high horse. I'm going to do it quick though. That they're not just trying to hurry up and get you fixed as fast as possible. They're willing to walk through the messiness of it and let you try different stuff until something works. And who also aren't like, you shouldn't have got yourself in this problem. You should have said no the
Right.
first time.
Right. Exactly. Well, that's ridiculous because no one is without sin. And just thinking about Colossians 3:12 and put on a heart of compassion and kindness and and there's meekness in there. And Deb, you nailed it earlier talking about our pride. You know, we have pride with things. We don't want to share things. We want to keep things hidden. And we don't think that we have a problem, or we might down deep, way deep inside think that. But if we all are humble and realize we all sin and we all have issues, then that helps us to be kind to others. And you know, another thing I wanted to talk about is so what was the key to when things began to heal? What was the biggest part of healing? And Deb, maybe you could say for you, when did that take that turn when you weren't just frustrated?
I think that there's many things, and that's pretty much what the whole book is
Yeah,
about.
right,
So,
right, yeah.
in less than 180 pages, I'll try to sum that up.
Okay.
I think that it was, first of all, before Dave ended up getting fired from his job, I was really trying to hold things together. Like I had known for a couple of years what was going on, and I'd seen relapse after relapse,
Mhm.
and we'd had people involved in our lives, a couple pastors and stuff, and but still just trying to keep it under wraps because of the shame factor. Like I must be a terrible wife if he has this problem, or and I think that's true of a lot of people. Like I must be a terrible mom if my kid has this problem, and there's that shame factor that kind of just weighs
Mhm.
on us. And when I went for me, the turnaround really was joining a recovery group where there were other Christians who were struggling with the problem, because I was having a real hard time making that connection between you can still be a follower of Jesus and have a problem like addiction. It just
Yeah,
didn't,
right.
it didn't compute to me and my theological background. It does now, but to sit among Christians and to hear them share their testimonies, and to share their struggles and to be like, and we love Jesus, it was mind blowing to me
Ah,
to be in a community like that where people were like accepting of each other and
mhm.
loving and not judging and not, and so we had 11 months of that environment and being heavily involved, especially me being involved, because it isn't just the addict who needs it. It is the family members who need that as well, that
Right,
support. And that,
right, right. Yeah.
especially if you have that layer of, I don't want people knowing our stuff,
Mm.
that was actually preventing him in a lot of ways from having a fall, which was in some ways what he needed, maybe, was to have the rug pulled out from under him. So me becoming willing for that, and it didn't make it easy, it was horrendous, but me slowly becoming willing to be like, okay, God, whatever it takes for Dave to be healed. And holy
Mhm.
cow, I did not know what I was asking for.
It's the
But
phrase right there. Yep,
yep.
yep.
But I mean, look at us now. 15 years,
Mhm.
not 15
Mhm.
years. Is it 15 years?
Yeah,
Wow.
you think?
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
it is
Knowing your
15 years
family
later.
for a long time. I've
Yeah.
I've known you guys for forever, so it's like, you know,
Yeah.
yeah. That doesn't seem like it could be that long, but
I'll
so
second. Oh, sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say a little different. I mean, similar but different for me. Knowing kind of the thing that turned around is exactly that same thing that I had, and I want you to hear this. This is going to sound like bad doctrine, but it's not. Trust me, I'm right. Um, that um, I had tried repentance. I repented. I quit every morning and
Mhm.
begged God for 15 years. I'd wake up and like, today I'm not going to use. And I hated it. And I think all along I was repentant, but um, I wasn't in a place that really understood that repentance happens because of grace. Like when you believe, oh, my repentance fixing doesn't mean that I'm not going to sin again or that I'm going to be perfect now. It means I trust that there's a God who still loves me even if and when I blow it. And being in a community that understands that and echoes the heart of God in that when we are repentant and believe we can be forgiven. And I felt that. I knew that to be true, and I knew that to be true of my family and the people around me, that all still loved me even when the dirt came out. But to be in a community, especially a 12, this was a 12-step program, but all these people who believed the same thing and had just as horrific stories to tell. And then we all went, okay. And the other beauty to me, though, was no fixing. That you would not, in that group, at least in that group. Now, there are other forums I was in where it was that you're expecting fixing. I'm in therapy, I'm with a doctor, I'm with a group. But in that group, all I knew up to that point, before I got in a 12-step group, in a support group, was you'd share your thing at church by men's Bible study, and you'd get 9 verses and 3 books and 7 pithy sayings. And it was a revelation to me when other people you'd tell your story, this deep, dark secret, this painful moment, remember something awful or a victory, and everyone go, okay. They wouldn't add to it. They wouldn't fix it. They just exuded the understanding that you're accepted and loved right here, right now, with that baggage. And that allowed for a long-term miracle. I think I always want the miracle that is like, I prayed for my back to feel better and I'm healed. Oftentimes the miracle is you had to do stretches for 30 days and then your back got healed. And the long-term miracle for me was slogging through day after day, having compassion, people around me, physical, mental, spiritual input, compassion that was not condescending, that was not pitying. A community that, I'm gonna get choked up again, a community that showed their compassion by tangible help. Watch the kids. They're going to cut me some slack when I'm late. When I'm late for coffee, they're not going to be like, well, what's your problem? They were going to cut us some slack when we couldn't make it to church because life was just too difficult this morning. And that was when I realized, okay, I can do this.
Right. And that kind of answers the last question in that what holds you true, what holds you from that is the other people. And, part of this, I guess, feels like, well, we all have sinned. We all have things in our life. We have hidden things. We have those kinds of things. No one, and I'm not even talking about just the church, but a neighbor or whoever, everybody has their thing. And, it's trite to say nobody's perfect, but, people who judge others for whatever, like they just got to turn the mirror and look in the mirror, because we all have things we have to work on. And I think, when we see a homeless person and someone's judging why they're there, that person probably lives in an apartment. They're just, who am I to say that? Anyway, I could go on and on this topic, but we can't do that. But anyway, so why don't you give contact info that we could, with someone could contact you, or I've seen your book on Amazon and such. It's probably in bookstores too. And so why don't you give some contact info and that we could give someone.
Dave, if you want, and I want to give the contact, I'll give the book information is available on audio book. It's available on Kindle and in print, and you can get it anywhere. You can get it from Baker Books, but it's also available at any retailer online.
Great.
The Heart of Compassion. Yep. Or no, The Heart of Recovery. See, even I get it. The subtitle is Compassion.
Here, I'll put it up here.
There you go.
Yes. Thank you. Okay.
You can contact us. Probably the easiest way is my email is Pastor Dave at, this is a weird one, Restore, that's the name of the church. Restore Kitsap is our county.org. So it's Pastor Dave at Restore Kitsap, KITSAP .org is probably the easiest way to make sure it gets to me. And you can reach Deb that way too, and I'll pass it on to her.
For Washingtonian, I totally know Kitsap.
Right.
No big deal to me. But and Paulsbo, being from Snohomish, it's like people are like, what are those names when I went to college? It's like they're Indian names, But anyway, Well, it's been great talking to you guys, and I've wanted to for so long, and I really enjoyed your book. You know, I had it for a long time, and people kept borrowing it, taking it from me, and reading it, and then it's like I need to just read this myself and just keep it with me and read it for a while. So I was really glad when I was finally able to do that, and I have referred it to many people, and I think it's a great book, and it touches on a lot of things, no matter what your issue is that you're struggling with. And so I just appreciate both of you and thank you for joining us today. And you guys can, that are watching, can watch this. Well, I guess, anyway, our YouTube channel, Nicki Corinne White, and, look us up and pass this on to other people. And we just really thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.